All right, let's talk about cell organelles. Cells are the smallest collection of matter that can be considered alive. So that basically means they're the smallest units of living things. Anything smaller than a cell is not alive. All organisms are made of one or more cells. So some organisms are single-celled, such as bacteria, and other organisms are multicellular, like you and me. This is a good example of a diagram of a cell, and we're going to talk about several of these organelles: endoplasmic reticulum, plasma membrane, the cytoskeleton, ribosomes, mitochondria, the Golgi, the nucleus, and the cytoplasm. And this is an animal cell, so it doesn't show the plant-specific parts. We're also going to talk about plant cells and their unique organelles. So let's start with the cytoplasm and the cell membrane. The cytoplasm is the goo in which everything else floats in the cell. So it's kind of like Jell-O, and all of the other organelles are suspended in it. The cell membrane is a lipid layer that surrounds the cell and distinguishes the inside of the cell from the rest of the world. The nucleus, which is here, is commonly called the command center. So this is where the instructions for doing everything in the cell come from. It stores and protects the majority of the cell's DNA. There is some DNA in some other parts. We'll talk about that later. The nucleolus, which is this little part on the inside here, makes RNA and ribosomes. So this is really important for you to remember. The key function of the nucleus is that it is the command center or the command base. It's kind of like the brain of the cell. Ribosomes are little protein factories, and so you'll see these scattered throughout the cytoplasm. You'll see some attached to other organelles, which we'll talk about momentarily. So looking from above, they're just going to kind of look like little dots. And these do some very important things, making proteins. So they use the instructions from the DNA to put the proteins together. They are made of RNA and some proteins themselves. The endoplasmic reticulum, or the ER, makes lipids, does detox for the cell, and makes secretory proteins and membranes. And so the endoplasmic reticulum is this squiggly looking thing here and here. And there are some parts of the ER that have ribosomes attached to them. This part here, where it looks like it's got little bumps on it, the little bumps are ribosomes. And this part here that doesn't have bumps on it, that is the smooth ER that does not have ribosomes. And those two parts have different functions. We don't have time to go into all of the different functions, and so it's really important that you check the supplementary material that comes with the book to make sure that you fill in the blanks that we don't go over in the slides. Now, the Golgi Apparatus, which is this pink pancake-looking stacked thing here, is sort of like the post office. It is the receiving center. It does the sorting and modifying and shipping for things that come from the endoplasmic reticulum. So most of the organelles in the cell are actually working together to get a particular thing accomplished. So proteins are composed in the ER, and then they get sent to the Golgi apparatus to have some things done to them. So they're modified, and then they're shipped outside of the cell through these little things called vesicles here. So moving on to the mitochondria and the chloroplasts, we talk about these together because they have several things in common that suggests a common ancestry. Both mitochondria and chloroplasts have their own DNA and ribosomes. They have a double membrane. So there are actually two membranes here. There's one here and there's one here. And in the mitochondrial cell, it's a little harder to see, but there are two right there as well. And each of them is somewhat autonomous. So that means that mitochondria can reproduce themselves and change shape, and chloroplasts can change shape and reproduce themselves. And so the nucleus of the cell isn't actually completely in control of the replication of DNA or the replication of the mitochondria or chloroplasts at all. So they're sort of like little autonomous units. The mitochondria, talking about this over here, is the site of cell respiration. And so this is where the cell uses food energy to make molecules of ATP. So, for instance, the food that you eat is supplying you with molecules like sugars, and the mitochondria is where these sugars are converted into ATP, which can be used to do other things in the cell. For instance, take notes with your hand while you're watching these little videos. So the chloroplasts here are only found in certain kinds of organisms, not in animals, plants and bacteria and algae. And this is where photosynthesis occurs. And the point of photosynthesis is to convert sunlight into food. And we will talk about that more in another module. Now the cytoskeleton is a little hard to see in these pictures and in a lot of other images of cells. So these little squiggly lines here are examples of pieces of the cytoskeleton. And so the cytoskeleton's purpose is to be scaffolding and highway system, and it helps with keeping the shape of the cell. It helps to organize the cytoplasm, to keep some organelles in place and to allow other organelles to float around and be a little more mobile. It also is a highway for some proteins to move little vesicles like these around within the cell to get from one place to another. And then there are centrosomes, which are here. And these help to organize some of the cytoskeleton. So there are parts of the cytoskeleton that actually grow out from the centrosomes. And so these two structures here help with cell division as well as organizing the inside of the cell. And then we move to the cell wall, which is this part around the plant here, plant cell, sorry. So the cell wall is found in plant cells and bacterial cells, some bacteria, and also some types of prokaryotes, and also in fungi. And this is for structural support, basically. This is what allows plants to be, some trees are hundreds of feet tall. So it's because of this structural support here provided by the cell wall that they can get to be that tall. And it's made of different things depending on the organism. So in most plants it's made of cellulose. Pectin is also used, and then fungi actually have cell walls made of chitin, which is interesting because it's the same carbohydrate that the exoskeleton or the outer skeleton of insect bodies is made of. So make sure you check with the supplementary material and that you understand the difference between plant cells and animal cells. That's a very important distinction.